So this morning we're going to be looking in Luke 23, um, as we did yesterday a little bit, and from verse 32 to 43. So two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they were crucified. They crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." So, just a couple of reflections on this passage, and then we're going to go into a time of prayer. And there's two things I want us to particularly think about when we go into the time of prayer, but I'll get to that. There's a couple of prophecies fulfilled here. First of all, in Isaiah, when it talks about he'll be numbered with the transgressors. And then in Psalm 22, it talks about them casting lots of Jesus' clothes. And both of them come to fulfillment here. But what I want us to focus on is mainly the two criminals' responses to Jesus. They couldn't be more polar opposite. One on his left, one on his right, and each of them have a completely different response to this person, Jesus. One of them, Sam talked a little bit yesterday about being in that position and Jesus in all that pain, being unable to breathe, and yet he still says the words, "Father, forgive them." Perhaps the first criminal who mocked and he belittles Jesus, he tries to tear Jesus down, seems very prideful, even in those last moments when surely both criminals know that this is the end, this is it, and he chooses that response. The other criminal, rather oppositely, chooses to rebuke the first criminal, and it stands out to me that he's God-fearing, he's humble, he recognizes his own faults, and he sees the Savior that's right next to him. He sees the King. Although it's written as mockery over his head, he actually recognizes the crown that should be placed on Jesus. And I think that's just quite incredible. You have one criminal who reward is basing everything on a human empire rather than God's kingdom. And another criminal who, in his last moments, realised he can't save himself. He has no time to better himself. There's no time to make up for any bad things that he's done. And that kind of sums up nicely that we're saved by grace. It's the last moments, he's just about to die, and Jesus saves him. He can't do anything. He can't say, "Oh, Jesus, save me, and I'll go off and do mission. I'll go off and tell all my community about you." No, he can't. He can't do that. In his last moments, he chooses to be saved, and he recognizes what's in front of him. So the key words here are rest and reign. And I think about the pain that they must have been suffering, and the relief it must have been to that one criminal who accepts Jesus, not just after he dies and he wakes up in the kingdom and there's no pain, there's no suffering. He realizes he's made the right choice. But even before he dies, the relief that somebody's finally accepted him, even though he can't do anything about it. And reign, as we go into a time of prayer now, maybe perhaps the question you reflect on today is, what would I really give up to follow Jesus better? The first criminal who mocked him wasn't willing to give up his own pride, wasn't willing to give up his empire, if you will, in recognition of who Jesus was. But the second criminal was. So as we go into time of prayer, I'd like to pray over, it can be our community, it might be people you know, it might be people in your family, but ultimately, I wanted to pray, God, I want your kingdom, not human empire. Because ultimately, when his kingdom comes, we're saved. There's peace, there's rest. Even when we go through times of trouble, there's hope. And I think that's something that we sometimes can take for granted a little bit. So we're going to go into a time of prayer now. Sam, do you mind opening in prayer, and then I'll close when appropriate, and other people can just pray freely. Thanks, Sam.